Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I am Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion. We are quickly approaching 200 poetry discussions in the poetry discussion playlist here on the channel. So, if you are a fan of literature, if you love literature, you are a literature lover, and you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more, because literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel. Poetry, short stories, novel discussions, a little bit of writing here and there. And today's poem is Sea Fever by John Masefield. And if you want to help me out with what I'm doing on this channel, if you hit that like button, it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's poem, Sea Fever by John Masefield. It reads as such. I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and the sky, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by, and the wheels kick in the wind's song and the white sail shaking, and a gray mist on the sea's face and a gray dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying, and the flung spray and the blown spume, and the seagulls crying. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like a whetted knife. And all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trick's over. Now, the one thing that you will undoubtedly notice about this poem when going through it, if you read it yourself, is the undeniable rhythm that springs from the page in a way that almost like Edgar Allan Poe poetry ends up with an sort of undeniable rhythm to it. You can't read it without the rhythm. This poem has that same sort of quality. But the thing that is really so when you're talking about this, that springs up, that is important, that is sort of a meta commentary on the sea, right? There's a rhythm to the sea that is undeniable. You must be on that boat. You must be on those waves. You cannot say no. In the same way, and a gray mist on the sea's face and a gray dawn breaking. You can't deny those reading rhythms. But it's also sort of it's also a meta maybe commentary on the idea that is underlying this poem. Oftentimes, when you get into the sort of question of interpretation with this poem, oh, this poem is about living life by one's own measure. This poem is about being in tune with nature. This poem is about love of the sea and what it means to be primordial. This poem is about wanting to live one's own life by one's own measure. Okay, maybe, yeah, sure. That all sort of goes there, but you know what else it feels like? It feels a lot like addiction. It feels a whole lot like addiction, and it's called sea fever. The poem itself is called sea fever. Sea fever. Fever is a sickness. Fever is something that overtakes you, a spell under which you fall. So it feels in even parts as wanting to live life by one's own measure and addiction. Which brings up, so it would be easy to say, well, then it's a metaphor for addiction. The sea is standing in for gambling and prostitutes. But I don't think that is necessarily the case. I don't think it has to. I think that the idea of addiction is much greater than those things that we are sort of preached, those things which are preached to us. You hear about alcohol addiction, you hear about drug addiction, you hear about all of these things that are addictions, and you should not, you will fall under the spell of gambling. But how often do we hear that someone is simply addicted to laziness? I think there is a great deal of humanity which is actually addicted if we're willing to look at addiction by a little bit of a different measure. This person here, John Masefield, our speaker, not necessarily John Masefield, our speaker here, addicted to the sea. Well, that might be a real thing, mightn't it? After all, well, this poem is about freedom. How free are you living on the confines of a ship? You've got the whole of the sea out there, the whole of the ocean, all of water in front of you, but you yourself, your physicality is confined to a little ship. And probably you are not sailing for pleasure. If you're on a ship, probably you're working. So not only do you have the confines of the ship, but you have the confines of the workday, and a lot of the times the workday on a ship like this would be the live-long day. It would not be the work day. So are we really talking about freedom here? We're talking about an individual who's getting the itch for seafaring. That sounds to me like addiction. Addiction need not be the idea of gambling, need not be the substance of alcohol, need not be the substance of smoking drugs. It could be anything, couldn't it? So for myself, I have an addictive personality. I couldn't care less about gambling. That's not going to get me. Couldn't really care less about drugs. When I was a younger man, I was addicted to working out. Don't show it now, but I was addicted to working out for sure. After that, went through a spell of alcoholism. Really did. And now I'm a workaholic. All I do is this stuff. I have a full-time job, I have a part-time job, I have this. All I do is work, 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 work the live long day. Some people work to live, some people live to work, right? That is an addiction. If we are willing to look at addiction through a slightly different lens. Something like laziness can be an addiction. Paralysis by analysis, you get addicted to that feeling. I think all of these things at their root, at their core, are essentially just learned helplessness. Without the confines of some type of work, I don't know what to do with myself. Without the confines, the limiting factors of alcohol, some people don't know what to do with themselves. Without the sort of setup of the sea that our speaker here is giving to us, our speaker does not know what to do with his or herself. So if that is true, if this poem is about addiction, when I was younger, this was on the borderline of me being addicted to working out and me being addicted to alcohol. I had a woman. Now you can see very easily how a woman could lead you from being addicted to working out to addicted to alcohol. I don't mean that in a negative fashion, you know, probably. And I don't mean just women. I'm sure men do this too. During that time in my life, she had started taking me to church. And I remember sitting there as the preacher, this was a Southern Baptist church, and the preacher was on his high horse speaking about this, that, and the other. And he started speaking about addiction. And he was he started on this rant. And I say rant not in a negative fashion, but that, sort of how you do. Addiction. Going about how no addiction leads to a good life. And probably he was right. I'm a workaholic. I don't have a lot of balance. When I was an alcoholic, there was no balance. When I was addicted to working out, no balance. And he's just started down the list. Maybe you're addicted to drugs, but God can help you. Maybe you're addicted to alcohol, but God can help you. And we're sitting there in the middle of the church, and he says, maybe you're addicted to internet pornography. And I thought, oh my God, how did he know? So it's not just one thing that can be addiction, but no, everything can be an addiction. None of it is particularly permissive to a balanced life. But does this poem exemplify something much more baseline human than many of us are willing to admit? What percentage of us truly are the addictive type, but we don't find our way to alcohol or drugs or gambling, so it does not get identified as addiction the way that this person feels they simply have the C fever? This person has an addiction to whatever it is that C is granting him or her. This person is addicted, and it is going to ruin their life. It is going to lead this individual down a very stern path. Because no matter what type of balance he or she creates for himself, herself in life, eventually that itch is going to overtake them and force them back to C. And there is the last part of the metaphor. Sure, you have a tall ship and a star to steer her by. Sure, you have those white sails to sort of aim yourself. But at the end of the day, if that sea does not agree with where it is that you want to go, well, by God, you don't get to go. If at the end of the day that workaholic nature inside you says to you, you do not get to go where you want to go, you don't get to go. If the alcoholic inside of you gets what it needs and decides that tonight is going to be a rambling, drunken mess of violence, well, guess what's in store for you? I think this poem, though on its surface may be sort of cute and cuddly and on the nose and sort of, oh golly gosh, wouldn't it be nice to be out at sea? Oh golly gosh, isn't it nice to be out in nature? Really, what we're doing is taking into account the darker nature of the self. Really, what we're doing is taking into account the darker nature of what it means to be human, what it means to get lost in something. Are we all really the addictive type? I never knew personally that I would be addicted to alcohol until I did it. And I didn't start drinking, I think, until I was 22. Didn't have anything to drink. I was against the stuff because, we all have our reasons. Stuff from my childhood, I was against alcohol. Till I tried it. I didn't know. I didn't know that was in me. Are we all addicted to something which would overtake us if given the chance? I think probably. I think probably that is part of human nature. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. I've got work to do. Let me know in the comments section if I am too far off course and need to readjust the sails. This is all I do on this channel. I talk about literature. And if you enjoy that sort of thing, hitting the like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance, but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to stick around for more.